You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to the program. Two of the stalwarts in the Arkansas legislature now join us. Senator Jonathan Dismang, Senator Clarke Tucker. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you.
All right, let's begin. I brought you guys here primarily to talk about some controversy in the business community over some film tax incentives. There is actually some, I don't know how to say it, just some communication going around that you guys got rid of film tax incentives in the last legislative session, which to my reading, you expanded them. So tell me what the state of film incentives are in Arkansas right now.
So first off, there's really two buckets here. You have a rebate bucket and a tax credit incentive bucket. And so I think what people have misunderstood is we beefed up both of those technically through the legislation, added to them, and also created some incentives for impoverished communities and rural communities and that sort of thing, and filming were to take place there. But people are saying that that did away with the rebates. Well, the rebates have never really been funded by the state. That's something that governors have chosen to fund through the quick action closing funds. That avenue is still available for this governor, and I think he'll tell you too. I don't think there's been anyone that's been denied a request for a rebate at this point.
Where did this controversy erupt? I mean, how do we get to this state of confusion?
It's a mystery to us because we worked on the legislation and we did nothing but improve the rebate. Nothing bad happened to the rebate. We just added, as Senator Dismang said, a second bucket to make sure that we have as much incentive as possible for films that come to Arkansas.
The rebate went from 20 to 25%, correct?
That's right.
And what was the tax credit? Do you remember?
No, they mirror each other. So they both went up by the same amount, and the add-ons for those areas both exist. I mean, and one thing that may be adding to some of the controversy, if you go to AED's website or Economic Development Commission's website, it still says 20%. So there's probably some education that we need to be doing through the state to let people know what the changes are.
And just to expand on that, so the base credit or incentive for both the rebate and the credit was 20%, and the top was 30%. So what we did was raise the base from 20 to 25% for both the rebate and the credit, and we created more ways by working in rural areas, economically depressed areas, hiring veterans in Arkansas to get from that 25 to the 30%.
So the funding for that, though, you guys, I'm sure there's an appropriation, but you're not funding the appropriation. You're letting the governor's quick action closing fund provide the funding for that. Why not put some significant money in that as a pot of money? Again,
I think really you had a new governor, coming into the state, not quite sure where their priorities are and what they want to focus on. We know the paths are still there. We set up the ability for it to occur while still maintaining the tax incentive side of it. So there's a cap on that, but they still have the ability to utilize that even if the rebates aren't made available.
If it got big enough, would you guys lift the cap? I mean, would you find a way to lift the cap? I mean,
it's funny because we've had it suggested to us, why don't you have a higher cap? And it's like, yeah, personally, I would like to make $1 million every year, I personally want the cap to be higher. What we believe and what we need Arkansas data to show out, because what's been proved in other states is that every dollar that's spent on a film tax incentive is actually an economic driver for the state. And so when you cap how much you can give in an incentive, you're really capping your own revenue as a state. So I personally would like for there to be no cap. But some of our neighbors, like Oklahoma, I think has a $37 million cap. Kentucky has a $75 million cap. We need to raise the cap to be more competitive with these states. But there's 135 legislators who have as much input on that as we do, and there's a legislative process you have to go through, and they don't call it sausage making for nothing.
Yeah. And we need to do a better job as a state demonstrating the return on those dollars. And so, I mean, I would argue that, the dollars being invested that we're putting in through incentives for film, we're getting a return well in excess of that in tax revenue in the state. Again, we need to do a better job of demonstrating that so we have something to take to the legislature. And that's really one thing that we asked for through the department this past year.
Yeah. Do you think that there will be a push for some additional incentives or raising that cap in the next legislative session or even in the fiscal session?
So long as we can demonstrate it, I believe there would be.
That's the process. We got to have the Arkansas data. We know what other states have done. Georgia for example, had a cap on theirs, and they realized they were only limiting their own success. Now they film all the Avengers movies over there. Now, I'm not saying we'll get the Avengers in Arkansas anytime soon, but the first step is to show the Arkansas data, and then we can
You won't get them if you don't get them to come, at least. So that's all right. I want to talk about some other topics as well. So I come to you first, Mr. Budget Co-Chairman, Joint Budget Committee Co-Chairman. They still let you have that title?
It still do.
It still do. All right. We're going to have a special session before the end of the year? Or are we going to wait and do things in a fiscal session?
No, I think it's becoming pretty clear, and I think we'll hear some things soon, that we'll have a special session prior to the end of the year. I think one of the focuses will be tax cuts. I think there's some discussion about some other issues that I'm not as privy to that may make the call, but I do think that you'll see us focus in and do some reductions on the corporate and individual income tax cuts.
Is that because of the surplus that we have?
I don't think, well, so I want to make sure, and this is really for my colleagues and others, we will not cut taxes based on existing surpluses. We cut those based on forecast and anticipated future revenues. So it's not because of surplus, but I do think it's because of the economic conditions that we're having. It's anybody's guess where we go from here as far as a recession, or if it's a soft landing or harsh or whatever it may be. But I think for everything that DFA is seeing right now, we're in a position to continue that downward trend for our individual income taxes.
Anything you want to see on a special session call beyond more tax? I know you want more tax cuts, Clarke, so.
I appreciate Senator Dismang always emphasizing, because he's right, you should not cut taxes based on a one-time surplus. So my personal preference would be for no bill to be introduced until January of 2025, but that's not entirely up to me, and I will do my duty if this special session is called.
So you don't have anything else you want to see on a call? Other topics?
I have a lot that I would like to see done. I think it's dangerous when we start addressing things that are not emergent in a special session.
Yeah. You said that there are some other things being discussed. Are you going to just at least throw out what one or two of those things would be? I will throw out one for you, because I've heard the possibility of a potential Medicaid, overhaul in a special session.
I don't think we see anything that dramatic in this special session. Again, I think it'll be pretty limited in nature, and the focus is going to be, fixing things. I think we had there's some language, for instance, about having to keep doors locked at schools and unlocked at schools that conflict, and I think they're asking that we provide some clarification in issues like that. I think that's mainly what you're going to see added on.
Schools, a nice segue to my next topic. We've had a little bit of controversy around the Capitol complex for the last 2 weeks over the AP Studies course for African American history. Senator Tucker, I know you've been right in the middle of a lot of those conversations. Where do you think things stand today? Do you think this is still a red hot potato, or do you think that there have been some concerns addressed and we're making progress?
I think it is remaining a hot potato, in part because the state is continuing to engage on it. There was a point last week, not where everyone was happy, but where all 6 schools that are offering this course are going to offer the class. It could be listed as an AP course on the student's transcript, and the school can also weight the GPA like a normal AP class. And I think the schools, while not satisfied, were happy to proceed in that way. And then another letter came out from the administration demanding materials and curriculum from the schools, and it just continues to snowball when issues like that are happening. So that's kind of the current state.
How did we get to this situation? It was a late Friday afternoon, kind of pulled the rug out from under the schools that were planning to do this. Literally the Friday before school started the next week.
Right.
The timing of it seems like it could have been addressed a lot early on. You've had some conversations to find out why that happened, when it happened.
It should not have happened in that way, and no one disputes that. The explanation on that point on the Friday is that there was a clerical error between data systems. It should have been addressed in February when the decision was made, essentially. My question is, why this class? And the administration's explanation is it's a pilot, and there is some truth in that. According to the College Board, it still is in pilot status. But my questions are, we are treating this pilot differently than Arkansas has treated our own pilot courses in the past. And why is that the case? And not only that, but Arkansas is treating this course, which is a very important material for our students to be learning. And I don't think anybody disputes that. We're treating this pilot course differently than the other 40 states that are offering it in this school year are treating it. And that's what I'm trying to drill down on. The other point the administration made the other day in a conversation, which I think is important for the public to understand, is that they're not going to pull the rug out from under the kids this year. Now, they may have some questions, and we can have another conversation about that, about some of the material that's being taught. But at no point the administration said, are they going to cancel the class where in the middle of the school year the class just disappears? That's not going to happen.
Yeah, Senator Dismang, I'm sure you're happy that you don't have any districts or any school districts in your legislative district that are dealing with this controversy. I think you've dodged the bullet on this one.
Both of you are up to speed a lot more than I am on the topic.
I heard about it immediately because I have a lot of constituents who are taking the class, and the teacher was notified, the students were notified, and I started getting calls on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I will just note we have invited Secretary of Education Jacob Oliva to be on the show the last 2 weeks, and they have declined that request. I think everything that they've wanted to say publicly they have put out in statements, and we've received those and have reported on those. All right, just while we're on the subject of education, the LEARNS Act is moving into the school year here. What are you hearing from constituents on what they like? Are there things that they don't like? What's your interpretation of what's happening?
Really pretty quiet at this point. I mean, you've had a number of people that have taken advantage of the opportunity through the education accounts, and I think they're happy so far with that process. It's been pretty streamlined, and be able to utilize it to really have an impact on their kids. You hear from a lot of folks that have some kids that has disabilities or other needs that maybe not being met at the public school, at least in their area. They're able to take those, utilize those, and so I'm excited to hear about those things.
Education freedom accounts.
There we go.
Education freedom. Okay, get the language right
That's
there.
right.
What are you hearing, Senator Tucker, from your constituents?
A variety of things. Like Senator Dismang, I had a lot of questions about whether their kids are eligible. People are because the eligibility criteria change in year 1, year 2, and year 3. So I think that's a fair question that people have. And then I also have heard from schools in my district, both private and public, asking about the effect of the public money going to the private schools and whether that's going to make them subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So I'm working on that issue as well.
I would say that you're looking at what happens in year 1 and year 2. It's a pretty limited scope in terms of the budget impact. But in year 3, you're going to start budgeting for year 3 pretty soon.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How big of a ticket item is that going to be?
I think you're going to get a little bit of an example of what it's going to be with what's happening right now with enrollment and those participating, and hopefully we'll have enough at the conclusion of this to extrapolate out to know what it's really going to look like in year 3. One thing, if you don't mind me jumping off course, though, because we're both here, and I'm pretty excited about it. So we just passed out of Legislative Council today what would the final piece needed to eliminate any costs associated with students that take free and reduced lunch in the state. So excited that came through today. Colleagues obviously very supportive bill into session in today. So looking forward for that to trickle down through the school districts and then be able to utilize that.
This is a big deal. Every kid in Arkansas who qualified for reduced lunch, that price is not only reduced now, it's gone.
Yeah.
So it's going to make a big
Well,
difference.
congratulations. I know
Yes,
you both
sir.
have championed that issue, and that is great news to hear. And I get to end our conversation on that positive,
awesome.
great note there.
Awesome.
Senator
Yes, sir.
Dismang, Senator Tucker, thank you both very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
All right. We're back with more right after this.